And you're sitting there jigging and you can look down in the hole and you see them come by.
Welcome everyone to episode number 2 of season 3 of the Average Ontario Anglers Fishing Podcast. Season 3 is all about learning, and today we're going to learn a lot about lake trout and crappie from a local well, I guess he's not local, but he's in Ontario. It's pretty far local. We have here Thatcher from Drop Tine Tackle. How's it going, man?
That's going pretty good. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me on.
We had to bribe him slightly, but he's here.
Yeah, there's no bribe. Happy to be here.
So today, like I mentioned, we're going to talk all about ice fishing. Last week, 2 weeks ago, we talked about perch fishing and pike fishing through the ice. And we talked with Donnie from Hotbox Huts. That was a great episode. This week, we're going to talk to Thatcher about lake trout and crappie fishing, which is something that me and Andrew know very little about. So we're getting ready to learn. We have our notepads out. We're ready to go. And we're really excited. But before that, we have, as tradition states, every single episode, an interesting fishing fact. And to handle that, we have the man with the mustache and the beard, Andrew.
It's the best part.
I just wanted to say I am excited about the main topic, and I will get into interesting fishing fact because it's about lake trout. But regarding crappie fishing, Jesse and I are actually very, very good at fishing crappily. But fishing for the species we are poor at. So I'm hoping we're talking about the latter, topic of that. But as for lake trout, I mean, they're one of the species, when you think of fish in Ontario, what is something that guys come from around the world, from the States, they drive up. Us in Ontario, we go to even northern Canada to go fish for lake trout. Like, it is, I would have to say, one of the most quintessential Canadian fish, right? Would you agree?
Yeah.
It's right up there.
So Salvinius namekush. Or something. It's Latin. I'm not going to say that again because it's no one calls it that. Why would you? It's dumb. Sorry, scientists. But lake trout are actually super impressive. Like, we look at them and yeah, you think of a lake trout, you might think of this trout that gets huge. But there's a lot more to their whole do that's pretty sweet. For example, they live remarkably long for a freshwater fish in Canada. We're going to go into a little bit, but they can live up to 50 to 70 years in the wild, which, to put it in perspective, a lot of other freshwater fish, they don't make it that long. Smallmouth bass, usually 10 to 12 years. Northern pike, 10 to 15 years. There have been reports of them being 25 years old for pike. Rainbow trout, 4 to 7 years, occasionally reaching 11 years. So again, a lake trout reaching 50 to 70 years old, that's nuts. So the question is, why? Why can they live that long? There's a few different factors about it. First of all, they like to live in cold water. The benefit of cold water is it's usually oxygen rich. It slows down their metabolism, and it also reduces cellular damage and prolongs life because that metabolism is slower. Again, they will grow slower, but they don't have to eat as often, and because they're not burning as many calories as fast, essentially, they're living longer because they're not working as hard to survive. Cold water also lowers the amount of predators that are going to be eating them. Also, they get fairly big. That helps too. But with less predators comes less stress. Even for us humans, stress is a huge thing that can decrease our lifespan. So if we don't have to worry about, surviving to the next day, that's a huge anxiety that could be off of our heads. Unfortunately, we don't have to worry about that. But not lake trout. Therefore, they live a long time. Another cool thing is they have, now I don't know too much about this because, again, I'm not a scientist, but they have robust DNA repair mechanisms which help counteract aging-related cellular damage. These fish are one of the few freshwater fish where they have a genetic predisposition to support slow, consistent, steady growth throughout their entire lives. They don't kind of plateau, like we start to get old and then we stop, healing as well and stuff like that. Lake trout are one of these species where their bodies keep healing and regenerating and stuff like that their entire life pretty much. So they are really well adapted to live that long life. Again, because they live a long life, for example, their sexual maturity doesn't start until they're 6 to 12 years old. That's a lot long. I mean, a lot of fish, other freshwater fish species, that's the end of their life at that point. They've already spawned a few times. And you might think, okay, if lake trout can live that long, then why are we concerned about, some of their numbers and the decline in some, especially Great Lakes used to be full of them. Their numbers are a lot less now. And of course, there's a lot of different factors to do that. But I was curious to see, for the reproduction side, why wouldn't a fish that lives this long, can spawn this many times, why wouldn't there be more of them? Because I know there have been lakes I grew up fishing in Algonquin Park where we used to only catch lake trout. Like that was our spring camping trip, was lake trout in May. And now smallmouth have migrated in and they're just decimating the population of lake trout. And they can't keep up. But if they have all these big lake trout, having all these babies, why can't the lake trout still keep up? So I have I found them really interesting. I hope you do too. A female lake trout produces 1,000 to 3,000 eggs per kilogram of body weight. So if a average size female weighs 4 to 6 kilograms, they would lay between 4,000 to 18,000 eggs every single year. And again, they may not reach sexual maturity until they're 12 years old, but they can live 50 to 70 years old. So they have multiple decades of spawning. And you think that's a lot of eggs. So again, why are their numbers so low? Well, the survival rate from an egg to an adult is very, very low. Only 1 to 2% of eggs hatch successfully. So just to get to the fry stage, only 1 to 2% of that thousands of eggs are going to hatch because others are eaten, environmental factors, disease, all these things can affect the spawning grounds. Of the fry that do hatch, less than 1 in 1,000 fry is expected to survive till adulthood. So when you think of, again, a female salmon who may lay 18,000 eggs, approximately 4 to 18 fry per female would reach maturity. That's so little. So I just found it shocking that the rate of that would be so low. But again, they do live a long time. Again, to put it in perspective, a single female over her lifespan could produce between 120,000 and 720,000 eggs over all the different decades of spawning. But it's likely only 120 to 720 of these offspring likely reached adulthood. So again, just because they live a long time, that's cool. But I just thought it's a good reminder for us to make sure that we, when we catch a really big lake trout or a nice lake trout in general, it took a lot of years to get to that point. So we have to show due respect for these fish when we can. We can keep them. They're delicious too. But if we have to make sure we can look after their ecosystem, because they can have a hard time bouncing back because their survival rate is so low just in the natural world. Yeah, that was kind of my interesting fishing fact on lake trout. I'd never done research into that.
That's super cool because there's not a whole lot out there on them, to find for research.
Mm-hmm. Even the spawning grounds, they spawn in the fall, late fall, early winter, and it's on, in the shallows on rocky shoals, but they don't really have lake trout. They stick to just deep water. They're pelagic fish. Where they decide to spawn and, where they got to get all together, there's not a whole lot known about the reproductive cycle still.
I think Andrew has to invest in a wetsuit, a big oxygen tank, and a full National Geographic team.
I like it.
That was definitely interesting. You know what? That's the whole thing about the interesting fishing fact every single episode is it's learning something maybe that you know a little bit about and haven't really thought about it or researched about it, or in this case, something we didn't know anything about the sexual maturity of fish that lake trout. Anyway, let's get into our main topic here. Again, we have Thatcher from Drop Tine Tackle. Just a little bit of an introduction. Thatcher, super nice guy, hammer of an angler, very good. That's why he's on this episode.
I wouldn't go that far, but
every guy we have on that's a hammer, when we say that, they are always like, no.
No.
But guess what? They are. It's okay.
You don't have to say it. We just did.
Yeah.
But he also owns Drop Tine Tackle, which makes a lot of really cool things. We're going to get into that, not just for lake trout and crappie and stuff like that, but also very popular for musky fishing as well. We're going to talk a little bit more about some of that because I'm a big fan of some of the stuff. It might not be lake trout related. It might be musky related, but we'll leave that for a little later. So why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your history in fishing throughout your life, a little bit about your guiding, and about Drop Tine Tackle.
Born and raised up here in Nestor Falls, Ontario. Which is right on the most eastern side of Lake of the Woods. So a great area. It's like fisherman's paradise. Started fishing, I don't know, I think I was still in diapers. My dad was a guide. My grandpa owned a resort here. So I grew up on a on a lake called Crow Lake, which is right across the highway from Lake of the Woods, and it's got lake trout, musky, bass in it. Phenomenal lake trout lake. So it's a pretty special lake to me, just because that's where I spent most of my time as a kid and fished off the dock all the time. Like I don't think there was a day in the summer that I missed, down on the dock catching a bass or a rock bass or, something. I was always fishing for 20 minutes or a couple hours, trying anyways. And then, from there, I was asked to do my first day of guiding when I was 14. I followed my dad around. He said, you're not allowed to bring your fishing rod. You're going to drive the boat. You're going to learn how to take care of the people, take their fish off, put their bait on, just take care of them, and just follow behind me and we'll have a good day. And we went pike fishing and it kind of went off from there, I guess. From that, I started full-time guiding when I was still in high school. So I was first summer, I think I was 17. From there, I've spent the last 25 years. I took kind of a couple years off in between just to try some different things, still stayed at it part-time, and then kind of got back into it pretty steady again, like 2015, 2016, and then carried that through until a couple years ago. And then all this whole tackle thing started, the Drop Tine Tackle. I'm now making trout tubes and musky lures and stuff like that. So, and I never heard to get to fish. So
it's funny. I've talked to a bunch of guys in the fishing industry that make lures. Everyone's just like, if you want to fish, do not get into the fishing industry.
Right. That's what everybody said to me about buying a resort. I always wanted to buy a resort. And they're like, if you buy one, you're not going to be fishing anymore. I'm like, yeah, it's once I got older, I saw that side of it. Yeah.
So speaking about Drop Tine Tackle, what caused you to start making your own stuff and selling them?
In the beginning, it was just supposed to be a winter hobby between guiding seasons. My plan was to just basically go into walleye jigs. I wanted to make walleye jigs and just kind of run with that. Then I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. I got an idea that I did a few years ago. I sold some spinner baits for musky fishing. So I'm just going to start with that. And that kind of took off that first summer and sold a few. I wouldn't say many at all. And then that winter, I was like, well, I need something for ice fishing. So I got together with another local guy that was making tubes at the time. And I come up with the idea of what we call the Hunger Strike, which is a tube with a blade on the back. And there, Jesse's got one right there. And a treble hook up front because fish tend to head hunt. And that kind of comes from the musky world a little bit, introduce that and it just blew up. It's all over the place. Pretty amazed as to where it has taken us, I guess, if that's the right way to say it.
The popularity of these baits, just the lake trout stuff as well as some of your musky stuff, you see it everywhere. You see it all over social media, all over YouTube. All these like super awesome anglers that are like, you need this stuff is good. And it's unique stuff. It's not stuff that looks like everything else you're getting. It's something unique about it. And
yeah, I kind of wanted to change it, change kind of what was there and what everybody has always used. And yeah, like you said, it just really, the popularity went crazy. We're super lucky to be in contact with the fishermen that we deal with, like some of the, guys on YouTube and whatnot, like Mac Mulligan, like they catch massive lake trout up in northern Manitoba. We got a bunch of local guys here that just catch huge lake trout all the time. It's just wild what they catch. A lot of stuff I don't even post. It's just like, wow, these things are huge. So, but yeah, the lake trout tube thing just really took off, and it's crazy where it went and the people that I've met and the photos we've received. And that's probably one of I'd say the coolest parts is seeing and hearing the stories that people share with us. It's super cool.
Yeah, I was going to say that you have like the stuff that you have, like the rig, some of the rigs you have, like Jesse said, we see it on social media. You've made a good product when it may not be in like the box stores that we're used to going like, oh, and here we see, Drop Tine Tackle and all the tackle shops. No, but you have a product that is unique. You're a small business operator, but it's like good guys using this bait. It shows that they know it works. So the quality of a product there is absolutely there with your stuff.
And it's always funny, like you see in the tackle industry, like people have all these baits that go, oh, there's this new bait, it's nice and fancy, and they send a bunch out to some of the fishing influencers on YouTube and social media, and they catch fish on them, and then people are like, oh, that lure, it's amazing, I gotta buy one, right? And that's how it works in the fishing industry. But the fact is, some stuff actually legitimately is special. That's why people are using it, and they're still using it. It's not like those guys that get product, they use it for like their little contract, 2-3 months, 6 months, and then the next year it's at the bottom of their tackle box. These are staples that people are continually buying and using. So that's one thing. I always like to ask guides this, or people that have guided. So I like to ask and watch them when I'm fishing with them, like how they do certain things. But I thought because you make your own tackle and have a brand, that this would be an interesting question. So how has guiding shaped your approach to designing fishing tackle?
A lot of it, I would say, learning colors as to what works, that sort of thing. And then just kind of knowing what I like to use and what a lot of other, whether they were coworkers while I was guiding or, other local guys that fish a ton, knowing kind of what they like to use as well and what they'll change on a bait or, whether it's just swapping hooks out or, modifying it in some way. And as a guide, you're always trying to come up with the new best color or the new best lure while you're out fishing to put your guess on fish. And I guess that's kind of where I took it. And it got super lucky. I would say I wouldn't say it was a ton of skill. It just got super lucky with it. The timing was good on it as to when it came out, because lake trout fishing, I feel like probably like in the last 7-8 years, even like the last 10 years has just blown up. Like you see people on YouTube fishing them all the time now. Like they're making a point to go try it and do it and catch a big lake trout.
I'd also like to mention, for instance, just about the hunger stripe tubes, stuff that guides or anglers will do to baits. Like me and Andrew do this, especially musky guys. You modify your baits.
Mm-hmm.
You add a blade on the back, or you add a twister tail on the back, or you move a hook or upsize your hook, stuff like that. Looking at this tube, this has several modifications that a normal tube doesn't have. And it comes like this stock. So it's technically not a modification at this point, but it has all the modifications that you may have wanted to add. Because before you'd be like, I want a tube, but I want some flash. Or I want a hook that's farther back, or I want this better quality hook. These already have all that on it. It's already been thought out because you've been fishing with so many people and fished yourself that you're like, this is what this bait needs to be better. And that's an awesome thing for sure.
Mm-hmm. And that's what I like to see too. I want to use good hooks.
I would have to say one of the things about your baits is I bought a bunch of your musky stuff. The hooks are legitimate weapons. Like they're spears. Like
right.
They're high quality. I always am super picky. Like Andrew knows, I'll buy like high end musky hooks like that are $3-4 a piece, and I'll replace hooks, like all these baits. I'm just like, take all the stock hooks off, garbage, right? The hooks on your spinner baits and stuff, man, there's no way you need to replace that. They're super sharp. Yeah.
No, I don't know of anybody that's bent one yet, to be honest, or broke one.
And that's saying a lot because there's giant fish caught on them.
There is. Yeah, it's crazy. And I know some people aren't nice with them. So aren't nice with those hooks. They're pretty abusive sometimes.
So speaking along that lines, if you can think of maybe what's one of your favorite success stories or a story that someone has told you about them fishing that someone has had with your lures, maybe your lake trout lures, for instance?
It's really cool. I think more so to hear the success of like a parent or parents or a dad or whatever taking their kid out to catch either their first lake trout or their biggest one. And that's probably what I like to hear the most. That's probably the coolest thing to me is I like seeing kids get into it because I was once one, and we got to start somewhere basically, and that's the only way in is to get a kid out fishing.
Andrew still is a kid, so
take
him fishing sometimes.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I try to act like one. I know my wife says I act like my kid a lot. So
I got bad bird's nest, and I'm like, Jesse, can you untangle this for me?
Yeah,
like, Andrew, get out the push button reel again.
Yeah, there you go.
Demoted.
Yeah.
So anyway, if you're listening to this and you're like, what are they talking about? What are these products? I highly recommend. We're going to leave all the links below in the show notes. The Hunger Strike tubes for lake trout. We're going to talk more about that in the lure part of the lake trout fishing, but super high quality stuff made right here in Ontario. All the mods you need, you just literally open the package, tie them on, and you're good to go. You don't have to worry about any of that. And then later, like I said, I'm going to talk a little bit about the musky stuff because I know a lot of people like ice fishing, but a lot of people that live down here, they don't do it so much. So we'll give them a little bit of, a taste of summer.
Yeah, we're all thinking about it.
Yeah,
especially when it's been minus 30 up here. So,
I know.
And I saw a musky lure on your site. Again, we'll talk about it later, but there's one in particular that I really want to get on musky lures. But I'll bring it up again when the time
Can I guess what it is?
Sure.
Is it the spinnerbait with 6 blades on it?
Yes, it is.
Do I know Andrew or do I know Andrew? Yes.
Those have caught my two personal biggest.
Don't tell him that. He'll catch a bigger one than me again.
So.
All right, let's talk about lake trout. If we talk about musky, we'll never get back. It's like when you go musky fishing and you bring a bass rod and you're like, I'll just check a frog for a few minutes. The rest of the day you're doomed. Can't get into it. Anyway.
Nope.
So when it comes to lake trout fishing, now again, you live up near Lake of the Woods. It's a bit of a difference from where we're fishing. Like where we would go fishing for lake trout, we're talking down here, Lake Simcoe, classic. What's another spot, Andrew, that everyone down here fishes for lake trout?
Rosso or something like that out by Halliburton.
Yeah, like Muskoka, Lake St. Joseph, like all those, like right.
Like Tomogany is it Tomogany? Yeah. Is that how you say it?
Even that's like 8 hours north from us. So like,
oh, it's that far still. Okay.
There are some guys who go up that far, but a lot of the time, it's closer, even further down in the Muskoka areas.
Yeah, and I always try to remember this podcast. We have listeners from all over Ontario, all over Canada, and a lot of the northern states. Not to mention people all over Europe and apparently Zimbabwe. Neil over in Zimbabwe listens, but there's people all over. So when we always talk about, bass fishing in the Kawarthas or fishing on Lake Simcoe, and people that live up near you are like, hey, do a podcast about up here. And we're like, we don't know anything about that. That's why Thatcher's here. So we're going to talk about that. Now, some of the stuff we're going to talk about, it may not completely apply to the lakes you're fishing down here or like in different areas of Ontario, but lake trout is a lake trout. And generally speaking, all these tips are going to be useful to a certain extent. So have an open mind. So anyway, we're going to talk about lake trout. Thatcher, the question that I want to start off this conversation with is, what makes lake trout such a special species to fish through the ice?
I would say their aggressiveness and their drag peeling power. They're so much fun to catch through the ice. Like you can catch them in the summer, but to catch one through the ice is so much better. The pulling power that they have and the aggressiveness that they have in the wintertime is totally different than summertime, in my opinion. They'll peel drag like crazy, and it's so much fun to listen to it. So, yeah, and it's the next best thing to muskies in the wintertime.
I remember my cousin, we were ice fishing together and on Simcoe, and he caught a 15-pound laker, and it was on the old like wooden tip up, so it was like hand lining it up. Like it was like slicing through our hands, and it was a chore to get it up through that hole. We thought for sure we were going to lose it, and my grandpa was there with us too, and he just, old leather hands just like starts like ripping up the line. He had no problem. Our hands just like seemed sliced up.
Is that your cousin with the missing pinky?
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah, so definitely like you said before, lake trout fishing, it's becoming very popular, and that's for a reason. I mean, they can get huge, like Andrew said, like they can get their old big fish. It seems like in our area, there's a lot of lakes that have big populations of larger fish, but there's also a lot of lakes that has numbers as well. So if you're looking for a trophy or you're looking to have a fun day and catch a bunch of fish, it's a great sport. You'd be crazy not to do it if you had the availability to do so. I think one thing that most people wonder, especially when it comes to ice fishing, is a lot of people will be like, depending on the species, perch, pike, walleye, lake trout, whatever, where the heck do you look for them, right? So you can buy the lures, you can have the gear, but you look at Navionics or a map, or you get to the lake and you're like, where do you start? There's so many good lake trout lakes that me and Andrew are like, oh, we should go fish. But I'm like, I have no idea where to start. So when you get to a lake, maybe it's a lake you've never been to. What is your process of where you're going to start and what you're going to look for?
That's kind of a loaded question, but
that's fine.
The one cool thing about lake trout is in the wintertime, they can be anywhere. I've caught them as shallow as 5 feet. I've caught them over top of 150 feet, 10 feet down.
That's terrifying. That just makes my work so much more.
It really does.
Where could they be? Anywhere.
There's really no wrong spot to fish, to say it the best. But a lot of times I go to, like, if I'm going to go to a new lake and I don't have a Navionics map or like a lake depth map, I'm going to probably look at the shoreline and be like, well, that looks like a point that comes out. I'm going to start drilling holes, probably start in like the 20-foot range and then work my way out from there off of the point. I tend to fish I look for a lot of structure when I'm targeting, whether it's a super steep break or a nice gradual slope out. A lot of times it kind of varies as to where they're at and where they're feeding at for the day. I mean, sometimes they're out in the mud. They're just cruising the mud flats, and that's where it gets a little trickier because you're targeting the abyss. There's nothing there. There's no specific spot out in the mud. You drill a hole and you fish it. and you might catch a couple, you pack up, move on if you don't catch anything. So, and I don't give any spot a whole lot of time. I'm giving it 20 minutes, half hour. If I'm not seeing anything, if I'm seeing a couple fish, I'll stick it out for a while longer, maybe up to an hour or so, as long as I catch something and I'm seeing a decent amount of fish coming through. It's just a matter of time of when they flick that switch on as to when they're going to bite. So the whole thing for me is I try to stay as mobile as I can when I go. It's not always easy to do when it's minus 30 and you got to set up a shack, try to stay warm and fight with the buddy heater and just to try to get it started and whatnot. Nothing works in the wintertime. So,
and do you think that, like you were saying, the first thing you look at is a point? So you're trying to find, like, ideally you want to find those drop-offs because that's where the trout will be. Again, they're pelagic fish, right? So I assume they're probably just following bait fish. The trout themselves don't care about the structure. That's the bait fish does.
Yeah, and they'll, if it's a decent sized school of lake trout, they'll push the bait fish into a pocket on a drop off, and they'll have their feeding frenzy and go nuts there with them. But yeah, it's a matter of trying to find those travel routes where they're going up on a structure to feed, whether they're feeding on ciscos or perch or, shiner minnows or something like that. Most of the lakes that lake trout are in, that's a big part of their food source. And up here, shockingly enough, perch is probably one of their larger food sources, in my opinion, in the wintertime. They feed a ton on perch. Some of our trout lakes have so many perch in it. They're not big. They'll gorge themselves on it.
I think we all think lake trout are just like some majestic, beautiful, kind fish that lives in the deep waters. But really, they're voracious predators that will fit anything in their mouth and eat it.
They are. They will literally eat almost anything and everything. Like I've heard of people, catch one to eat it and it'll have nails in it. Like they're picking a nail up off the bottom or something. Like where did they pick up a nail at? Like, are they cruising underneath someone's dock where they dropped it in when they were building the dock? Who knows? Who knows what they're doing?
It does kind of blow my mind too. Just when you look at a lake trout, when you see their mouth like open, or let's say you just start like pulling open their mouth to take a look, it opens almost more like a bass than a trout. I find like a lot of trout, like think of like a rainbow, like they can open up fairly wide. Like salmon, they can have a pretty big maw, but again, it's a big fish. Lake trout, I find, have like an abnormally large mouth for a trout. And like it opens to the size of their whole head pretty much to eat whatever. So yeah, like when you think crazy. Of it, they're just torpedoes with like huge mouths. Like
like they're eating 5-pound eel pout. Like it's wild. That's wild what they'll gorge themselves on. And they don't. It's like they don't stop eating.
That's great news for us, though, right?
It is. Yep.
You have these fish that are, eating machines that will gladly come up and eat your lure. But I think the hardest part with lake trout fishing is just finding them. It seems like that's the thing. Yep. And like you said, they could be anywhere.
They can be. And you could get onto a spot and like, let's say a reef or something like that, or a point, and you're fishing with some other guys and someone's over here in 30 feet of water, or someone's up in 20, someone's out in 60. And the person out in 60 is catching them. The other person up in 20 isn't seeing anything. The next day you go there, you got to be over on the west side of the point. You got to find that spot where they're chasing that bait fish at, or where they're coming up onto the structure. And it kind of varies from day to day. I feel like no 2 days are the same with lake trout.
It's like that with a lot of fish.
When is Drop Tine Tackle going to be dropping like the X-ray sunglasses? You can just like look down and like illuminates lake trout in the depths, and you can just kind of track it.
I'll leave that up to people that are way above my pay grade.
Okay.
Yeah. So when it comes to finding lake trout, obviously, like you said, be mobile. Don't just sit in one spot. What technology or tools do you recommend for people to have to make that job easier to find fish?
You don't need nothing fancy to do it. Your simple Vexilar. I used in Vexilar FL8 for years, and we caught lake trout. You just got to drill more holes. You got to try to find that spot. And like nowadays with the new, like, let's say live scope, it's way easier to get on that spot on the spot. It's a lot less drilling holes. It's a lot less looking. But one advantage to going back to like the Vexilar is that you're going to drill more holes, and you've already got the holes drilled, so you can hole hop a lot easier to find that spot. Yeah, I might be able to pinpoint my spot with the live scope, but maybe they're not on that part of the structure today. Whereas if I go out there with the Vexilar, I'm going to drill a bunch of holes, I'm going to fish them all, and I'm going to try it. Regardless, I drilled the hole, I'm going to fish it, whether it's for 5 minutes or 20 minutes or something like that. Unless the hole is like way out off the structure somewhere, I'm probably not going to give it much of a shot. So, but it doesn't hurt to try it. That's one thing about lake trout. It doesn't hurt to try it because they literally can be anywhere. And it's a lot of fun when they're just below the ice and they're just cruising that first 10 feet down, and you're sitting there jigging and you can look down in the hole and you see him come by and
Terrifying.
make multiple passes back and forth past the bait and whatnot. It's pretty cool. And they're so fast. Yeah.
Speaking about that, how you said that sometimes they're cruising right below the surface, even in deep water. Speaking of that, I thought we could kind of go into techniques. Now, as we mentioned, you do have, your hunger strike tubes, and I'm sure you use a bunch of other different types of lures when you're fishing for lake trout. Why don't we talk a little bit about lures first, and then we can kind of delve into technique on how to use them, and maybe in different depths of water, because you said, you're gonna try shallow, you're gonna try deep, you're gonna try super deep. So what are maybe like your 3 top lures for lake trout that you always bring with you? And then we'll kind of go into how to work them.
So I guess the 3 top ones, obviously, I guess a tube, some sort of tube jig that we make. That's probably right up there. But the next probably favorite thing would be like I think it's Sebile Vibrato is a really, really good one up here. I don't use much for lipless crankbaits, I guess. And I know a lot of people do, but that kind of runs along the same lines as a Vibrato. That's a good one. And then probably I would say my next favorite would be like a Swedish Pimple or a Little Cleo. Color, my favorite is probably like a blue chrome, blue white. Gold is a good one. I don't use a lot of gold for trout, but it has worked really well for me a few times. But it's normally something white with blue is a lot of what I use, or glow. So those are probably my go-to colors. Those are my first picks probably all the time.
I own at least half of that.
I was going to say, last year we had on a guest right at the beginning of the season as well, a local guy that is a guide on Lake Simcoe, and he fishes lake trout, and he actually is a fan of these tubes. He's the one that told me to buy a bunch of them. Yeah.
Awesome.
And I remember him saying, he's like, yeah, all you need is white. White. And like Wonder Bread, which is pretty much white with like a bunch of different colors on it. Yeah. And that's like Lemon Head, stuff like that. Like I got one of these big ones that you sell, the big 1.5 ounce, 6-inch tube. And again, it's glow with the lemon head. It's just bright colors. Why do you think lake trout generally, you see when you read any article, you talk to most guys about lake trout fishing, it's usually like whites, bright colors, stuff like that. Is there any reason why you think that those are the popular colors?
Like, let's say like the chartreuse part of it, it works really well under UV light. So it's one of those vibrant colors that as soon as the sun hits it, it's just bright. And it's something that doesn't look natural to a fish underwater, something of that color, I guess. So I think they really hone in on something like that. It's like, okay, that's out of place. That one's wounded. I'm gonna come over and mess with it or eat it or whatever. But yeah, white is just a natural color, and it's one of those things. A lot of what we're kind of seeing with our tackle business is like a black. Black seems to be really coming around, and that's the other thing about this business too, is we're trying to get people off the color white, because there's a lot of other colors that work really well outside of white. White is like the staple color, but there's, in my opinion, there's more colors out there that work probably just as good. Yeah.
This is a tackle guy telling us we need more tackle. I mean, just kidding.
Follow the money, like people.
50 lures behind me.
They're all different colors.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, half of them are fire tiger, though. So it's like natural perch.
I like fire tiger. Yeah,
that's kind of focused on the hunger strike tube, because if you're fishing, ice fishing anyway, these should be in your box regardless of what you're fishing for larger predatory species. But I noticed I have a bunch here. So again, I was saying to Thatcher before we hit record that last year we had a lake trout trip planned. I ordered a bunch of stuff from Thatcher, whole bunch of stuff. Also some musky stuff, but we'll talk about that later. But I didn't get the chance to use it just because last year the ice conditions they're crappy, and the trip that we had, it was kind of later season, and the guy that we were supposed to go with was like, you know what, the ice is sketchy. So we didn't get out. But anyway, I digress. You have a lot of different sizes and weights. So I noticed like I picked up some 1/4 ounce or 3/8 ounce tubes, which I was actually going to use for something completely different, not even ice fishing.
Cool.
But then they go all the way up to 1.5 ounces. So what sizes? I know we kind of talked about, you're going to be fishing different depths, but what are some of your go-to sizes, and like what sizes you're going to use for different depths just to get started? If you had to buy just like maybe like half a dozen of them.
I guess for me, I think I fish differently than quite a few people. Than a lot of our customer base. I like to fish almost as light as I possibly can, and sometimes small. I'd say mainly like the 3/8 ounce. Oh, there you go. The 3/8 ounce hunger strike, or just a 3/8 ounce tube jig. I like that slow, kind of natural dead bait falling down. That's kind of what I like. I don't like the racing down part of it. That's just me personally. Probably our number one selling size is 1 ounce, whether it be probably winter or summertime. And that works kind of for both seasons, the 1 ounce size, which is the good part about it. And then, for our tube size, our 4-inch regulars, it's just a little smaller bait. And for most of our lakes here, they're feeding on small forage all the time. And that's another thing too. You sometimes would go to a bigger bait based on what they eat most of the time.
Because I noticed, if you look at this tube, I'm not sure exactly what size this one is, maybe 3.5, 4 inches long.
Yeah, that's the 4-inch one there.
So it's not a very huge profile bait, but the thing is 1 ounce. Like, it's literally full lead. Like, the head isn't just at the top like a bass tube. Like, the whole thing's full of lead. So just because you're fishing deep doesn't mean you have to have some ginormous lure.
Right.
Because you're going to be focusing on what the fish are feeding on. Like, I learned that with musky fishing. You may think, I got to chuck all these big baits because they're big fish. But sometimes those fish are keyed in on eating small fish. They're eating small fish, 4-inch perch, often. And you chuck big stuff, you're not going to catch as many sometimes, right? So you do have a whole bunch of different sizes you can choose from. And I didn't know what I needed, so I just bought one of everything. So.
Yeah. Well, I think you might have even asked some advice, but I hope I steered you.
I did. I was like,
so.
Hey, what color should I get? And he's like, not white. That sucks. Yeah. I was like, I'll have white.
Yeah,
just kidding.
You gotta have white. Everybody's got to have a white tube in their box. So I did
pick white, but I also did pick Wonder Bread, which is a Canadian classic. Let's be serious. It's not just a delicious bread, but it's also a really good tube jig color.
I'm gonna give Thatcher a budget at the end of this episode, and then he'll just have him ship me out some stuff because I didn't join Jesse on his order last year, so I was so happy. I need to make a new one.
I was so looking forward to the lake trout trip though, because I was prepared. I had a new lake trout rod, like a nice heavy lake trout rod, new line, all these new ice fishing lake trout jigs. And Andrew's like, I'll just use what I have. I'm like, that idiot, he's screwed. And then it got canceled. So I'm just stuck with all this brand new stuff on my. Anyway, so how do you fish these? That's one thing. You may have the lure, you have the location, you know where the fish are. But what the heck do you do? What do you do with these tubes?
You jig them, I guess is the plain and simple term of it. I like to just do a simple, steady up and down motion with it until I see a fish come in. And let's say if I'm in 40 feet of water, I'll fish typically 15 to 20 feet down. It's pretty rare that I actually fish down towards bottom. And I just sit there and I jig it. Sometimes I'll go down towards bottom and jig it a little bit, but most of the time I come, halfway up or 3/4 of the way back up from the bottom and just sit there and jig it until I get one to come in. And the whole idea is to play the cat and mouse game with them. And that's a good way to really entice them to hit. It's almost like musky fishing in the figure 8. You play the cat and mouse game with them, both sides, I guess. But lake trout are very similar. You want to take it away from them. I don't like to go super fast with it. Sometimes you just got to slowly reel it away. One of the biggest things is I've had a hard time doing is waiting for especially watching on the electronics, is waiting for that fish to actually get there to be engaged. Don't start reeling when they're 10 feet away or 15 feet away still below you. Wait till they're right there and then start trying to take it away. And if it doesn't seem like they want to engage, try something a little different, drop right back to what you're doing and just sometimes just a steady jig, just sitting there up and down. That's what they want. I've seen that a lot. I've seen it where jigging it, they don't want it being jigged, I guess, just sitting there motionless. And that's where just a basic tube would come more into play, not with the blade on the back, because the blade is the whole idea with that. When you're jigging, you want that blade to be making the vibration and the noise to call them in.
So why would you fish in the 15 to 20 foot range? What's the logic behind it? Are the lake trout just in general, like you said, I know they can be up high, but are they general, up in the middle of the water column?
No, they can see that good down there. And if you're fishing up higher, and if they're willing to come up to that point, they're more willing to engage in the bait. Whereas if you're fishing down towards bottom, you might have some come in and check it out. But if they're only going to come up a foot or two off bottom, it's hard to get them to do the whole cat and mouse chase game.
So it essentially, you're finding the active fish better fishing in that range
by doing that.
Cool.
Yeah,
it's like musky fishing.
Exactly. Yeah, you're gonna burn a bucktail in to try to get them to that aggressive fish to engage and do and hopefully do what they're supposed to do. Easier said than done all the time. So
lake trout are like The cold musky.
Very, very, very much so. That's why they're so much fun in the wintertime. Like they fight hard. And, you know, they do taste good too. I do enjoy
musky?
eating one. No, not musky.
Oh, okay.
Don't try and get like canceled, Jesse.
I'm gonna tell Glenn McDonald on you.
Yeah.
Okay, so before we get into crappie fishing, which I know Andrew's really excited about, I thought we could just talk briefly about equipment. So when you're using some of these tubes, big ones, small ones, whatever, what kind of rod and reel, line, swivel, like what's your basic setup that the average angler is going to need to get out and target some of these fish?
For our area here, I use like a 45-inch medium heavy rod, ice rod. I use some custom stuff by Thorne Brothers, and I love them. I've been using them forever, and I've put a Daiwa ballistic reel on them. 3,000. I like the 3,000. I wouldn't go any smaller than like a 2,500. I use 2,500s forever. I really like the 3,000 size now. 15-pound line, I've fished as light as 8, just more based on where or the size of lake trout we're targeting. Because some of the lakes that we have around here, I mean, a big lake trout's 5-6 pounds. You don't have to go super heavyweight with fishing for trout like that by any means.
And do you use like ice line specifically, or? I
normally don't. I take my summer reel off my summer rod and I put it on my ice fishing rod.
That's what I like to hear.
So yeah, but I am slowly changing my trout rods more to either straight fluorocarbon or back to straight monofilament, mainly because I fish outside a lot and it doesn't ice up as bad, and it's nice and quiet. And you know, I'm always putting like a 10-foot leader on anyways, so it's like, if I'm fishing 20 feet down, 10 feet of braid isn't really doing me any good. So I might as well just run straight monofilament or straight fluorocarbon and like a 12-pound or 15-pound or something like that. So
Thorne Brothers rod's very nice. One rod that I would recommend if you're more on a budget, you can't spend as much as that. And again, I wish I could spend a lot on ice fishing rods. I don't do it enough, but I definitely would. But one rod that I got last year, I got one of those new Shimano Convergence ice rods. The cool thing about these, they're like $50-$60, but they do have a bunch of models that are lake trout appropriate. And like you said, sometimes lake trout are like 5 pounds, but like a lot of the guys around here, they're fishing for big lake trout, like on Lake Simcoe, and some of those lakers are well over 20 pounds. So they do have a bunch of longer 42-inch medium heavies. This is a heavy for fishing for really big lake trout. So they do have a bunch of lake trout options, because sometimes you'll look at ice rods and they don't have anything that's beefy enough. So if you're looking for something that's reasonably priced, check out the Shimano Convergence rods. I just picked this up at Gagnon's, and it's a nice rod. But yeah,
Shimano makes a great product. Like all their stuff is really good.
I got a nice 13 fishing for my pike / trout rod. But again, like they can be fairly pricey, like $120, $130. But what I find is you wait for the sales come up, and oftentimes 13 fishing products, they're 50% or more off. So I think I got my rod, I think for like $45 or something.
Yeah, it's like $50
deal.
Yeah, one of those like nice Widowmaker.
Yeah.
They 13 Fishing's got some really nice trout rods too.
They do. We
super nice.
Again, we bought a bunch on sale a few years ago, and
and
we were just blown away by how good they were. I actually prefer them to some of the St. Croix stuff that we generally buy. But anyway,
absolutely. Yeah.
So you don't need anything fancy. Again, I think a lot of people, fishing is great. Like we always say, you can spend $20, $30 at Canadian Tire. You can spend $600 on a combo. You can still catch fish. So it's really, the gear oftentimes is more for the angler.
My favorite summer rods are the Daiwa summer rods and reels, the Daiwa Regal. When I was guiding with my customers, that's what they all got. I think it's a 10-ball bearing reel, 26-pound drag or something like that. Like they're awesome, and they lasted me multiple years.
We just started using some of the new Daiwa stuff. I got one right here. But like the Exceller, what's that other one you got? The purple one, Andrew?
Procyon?
Something like that.
The
but they're like
the one. Yeah,
$100, something like that, not even.
And Legacy or something like that.
Legalis,
that's it.
It's the Legalis. But again, we like to buy gear all different price points. But the $100 stuff recently, very impressive. And we're huge fans of Daiwa ourselves. Like, it's good stuff. So we could talk about lake trout forever, but we're not going to, because we actually have the next thing about crappie fishing. But before we do that, I thought we could just do a new segment that I haven't told Andrew about, and I want to do this every month, at least once a month. I'm a huge YouTube fishing consumer. I like to watch all the videos on YouTube of like fishing videos, stuff like that. I've seen like everything on my lunch break. That's all I'm watching, right? So I thought every month or every podcast, I could tell you 2 YouTube videos that I watched. I'm going to keep one local, one that's Ontario based or Canada, here in Canada, and then one that's just randomly, it could be wherever. So I thought I'd tell you about 2 videos that I recently watched. I'm going to put the links down below so you can watch them yourself. And I highly, highly, highly recommend you watch these. These are the first 2 that I picked are just like, they're going to be hard to beat, really hard to beat. But the first one is Jay Siemens released a video called A Week in Alaska, and it's a film.
Oh, that was awesome.
It's an hour and 15 minutes long. Like literally don't watch like a movie this weekend. Make some popcorn, grab some beers, and like watch this as a movie. Like it is a legit movie. He goes up, he's fishing in Alaska. The drone footage that he gets is insane. Like he's just looking down on a river and there's all these like, red salmon in the water and he's fishing for them. It is an insane watch. 100% highly recommend it. Jay Siemens is like knocking out of the park. I was like, my wife was like, oh, Jay Siemens, his stuff it looks so professional. I was like, he's literally come so far in like just a few years. Like his stuff is it's literally National Geographic quality. It's amazing.
And that Alaska video was like over and above like a lot of stuff.
So
they
good.
Did over the
I haven't seen the whole thing, but I've
awesome.
seen snippets, like clips of it, and yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah. I'm just like, I want to do that. I want to go there.
Right.
He's like, you shouldn't go to Alaska because then everything else will seem like crap. And I'm like, yeah,
but I still want to go there
I
once.
probably shouldn't do that.
Yeah. Everybody says you go there once and you want to stay there.
Yeah, that's the problem. I would literally move there. My wife would be like, when are you coming home? I'd be like, who are you? Just kidding. Anyway, so I highly recommend you watch that. We're big. Me and Andrew are both big Jay Siemens fans. And we might have to actually get him on the podcast. Maybe that's in the works. All right, you didn't hear it from me. Anyway, the next video is, I don't know if you've ever heard of the YouTube channel called Boatside, but it's a bunch of guys in Sweden or somewhere around there. They have very cute Swedish accents, but they speak English. So they're like, oh, I'm using this pike lure. It's just like, it's not funny, but it's like, oh, that's cute. But these guys target giant pike. So Boatside, all they do is fish for pike, and they'll do like some of these videos where they're like, lure challenge, I'm using the 17-inch Savage Gear pike, and they're casting these big baits and stuff. But the latest one that I watched, it was really, really good. It's called Fishing a Grayling Swim Bait for Mountain Giants. And I don't know if you're familiar with the YouTube channel Marlin Baits. He makes the most insane wooden baits ever. He makes them a grayling swim bait because they get invited into this private lake on this property where they have to hike in like 6 miles. They get there, there's a cabin with a boat there. They have to hike everything else in, and it's full of grayling. And there's giant pike in this lake. Not a lot of them, but when they're there, they're giant. So they go in there and they have this giant grayling like glide bait with like the fin even moves and stuff. It's just like, it's like 18 inches long. Like it's huge. And they're there and they're fishing this lake and it's beautiful and the footage is amazing. And they end up catching a giant, massive pike. But just the drone shots, the way it's filmed, it's just really good. The accent's hilarious, like so good. Just a good quality video. And I highly recommend you watch both those. They're really good. The one with Jay Siemens is a long watch. It's like over an hour. This one's more like 20 minutes. So it's doable on your lunch break. So that's Jesse's YouTube fishing recommendations of episode 2. I'm going to make Andrew watch that second one because Andrew likes grayling and pike.
I have seen that second one, Jesse.
Did you?
I legit watched that like a little bit ago. I was like, this thing is awesome.
That just proves how good it is if Andrew's watched it.
Yeah. I see. That's one of my desires is to, one, catch a big pike. I really want to get a big pike under my belt, but to use like high-end swim baits, like custom painted, awesome swim baits, and catch a trophy fish on one of those. Like that is, not only catching a good fish, but catching it the way I want to. That's prime.
We could talk forever about YouTube videos. You know who else has some pretty good YouTube videos? Average Ontario Anglers, just saying. Anyway.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this upcoming season.
I am too. Here's the thing.
It's going to be good.
This is just a little podcast announcement. So we've had a lot of very positive feedback. So we're really thankful for that. A lot of people are like, you know what? They liked listening to the podcast every single week, but they're like, I don't know how you guys do it. Like, we totally understand. Like, this is really good. Moving down to 2 days a month, better quality episodes, super good giveaways, super good guests. And me and Andrew are so much like, how much less stressed are you, Andrew?
I'm enjoying the podcast more, and I hope that really comes through.
You had last week off.
Because yeah, instead of like pushing ourselves, okay, like, and it's not so much finding topics to talk about. That's not an issue for us. If you ask any fisherman, they can talk about it forever. But to take away the need to every single week, we have to make sure we're recording. You know, it's nice to be able to, hey, I don't have to record this week. You know what? I have some time though. I'm going to prep for the next episode. It's a week away or 2 weeks away. And yeah, we're putting more love. We're baking more love into this delicious cookie that we call AOA podcast.
That's cool.
Yeah. And it's giving us more time to film stuff.
Mhm.
And if you haven't watched, we have 2 videos we put out last year. One was a backcountry walleye trip where we had the drone out, the GoPros, the 360s, all that stuff. We did a musky video too. It was like we had the drone out. We crashed the drone. We flew it again after we got it back. Like, we love making stuff like that, and we would like to do that more in 2025. So we're going to do that. But anyway, let's talk about crappie. Crappie is something that I find interesting, but Andrew is in love with that.
I love pan fishing.
Andrew loves it. So again, you're a bit far north from us. That's totally fine. Some of the questions I got, I'm like, ask Thatcher everything. And they're like, where do I find crappie in the Kawartha? It's like, he doesn't know that, I guarantee.
No,
Where do you go for crappie? On Lake Skoogog?
Yeah.
So again, crappie are crappie. They're going to be different in different lakes, but they're still the same fish. So, you know, we can get something out of this depending on where you live. But we have to be nice to those podcast listeners that live up in the sticks up near Lake of the Woods.
Yeah.
So anyway, speaking of crappie, where do crappie typically congregate in the lake in the winter? So like you get to a lake, where are you going to start looking? What's your plan?
In the water.
Smart.
So hopefully, like Lake of the Woods, you got a depth map of it, and you're going to look for the deeper water. Like sometimes the steeper shorelines, like cliffs or something like that, you can get up close to them. They're going to congregate more to the deeper areas, like our local areas here, right in Nestor Falls. You know, there's a huge migration of crappies that kind of moves into town because that's some of the deeper water that we have at this end of Lake of the Woods. And it's like 35, 40 feet of water, a lot of it on average. So really they can kind of be anywhere in this general bay. But there's a few specific spots, like off of a point. Like a lot of times you come off a point, and as soon as that rock drops and hits the mud, a lot of times it's deeper there for a little bit before it kind of comes back up onto the mud flat. So a lot of times they'll be right in there in that pocket or just on that outer edge of that. And what they're feeding on, probably like some sort of bugs or something like that. And we're fishing them deep, like I mentioned, you know, close to 40 feet. And a lot of times they're suspended a couple feet off bottom. The biggest thing with them is hopefully you got electronics, you know, whether it be a Vexlar or the new stuff, the Live Scope, but don't stop to fish until you mark fish. Keep drilling holes until you get on fish. Whether you mark 1 or 2, drop down, try to catch it. And hopefully, like once you start moving around and drilling holes, and you might get on a little pod of them, and the pod will move. Try to stay mobile if you can. You're going to get your best action if you stay mobile and trying to move around. Not easy to do when you got a shack and the heater and the whole work. Sometimes you're just kind of stuck there waiting for the school to come back around through underneath you. You can do it that way too, but I would always start by finding some fish before you even drop and set up.
And when you're talking about that kind of rock mud transition, you said it's a little bit deeper. Like, is it like there's 6 inches deeper, a foot deeper?
Probably like 4 or 5 feet deeper. So it's a pretty big, I guess, transition. Like it'll come off from the point and it'll hit that mud, and then it'll kind of, and it could stay like let's say 40 feet for maybe 50 yards or 30 meters or something like that. And then all of a sudden it'll come back up onto the mud flat in like 35 feet. That one little pocket right there off that point could hold all the fish, or like I say, they could be just out off the edge of that, kind of cruising the rim of that hole. And that's kind of the spots we look for and try to fish. And then that kind of changes throughout the winter season too, as to where we fish. They're normally a little easier to find come late ice. Whereas like right now, we're in January, they're going to be packed into the deeper spots because that's where they finished up when the lakes froze. And that's where they're going to spend the next little while at for the most part.
Definitely. And even down here in, southern Ontario, you could say, a lot of the advice that I've been given when I ask people about where to find crappie, they say the same thing as the deep basins, especially early in the season. So say, for instance, you're looking at, one of the Kawartha lakes, you're going to be looking for the deepest areas of those lakes, not like 120 feet, but like you're looking for a deep flat in like 30 or 40 feet of water. And that's where those fish at the end of the season, you have to think the end of the season. Remember we talked with Bobby Belmonte last year about, late fall fishing for musky, walleye, smallmouth, those bass and walleye and stuff at the end of this year when it's really cold, they go deep because the water stays more consistent. It's not like dropping and getting colder suddenly. So that's where they kind of winter. And then when it freezes, they're still there. They're still in the deep spots. So it gives you kind of a spot to start at. And then, like you said, I see so many crappie guys just drilling a hole, looking down, fishing for a bit. Like they're drilling like tons of holes, like 20, 30 holes, right? So that's a good tip, is be mobile, like be ready to turn the lake into Swiss cheese, like drill holes, drill holes.
Yep.
If you don't see fish, it just means there's not a school of crappie under there. Like they're not like as much as perch where you're like, come on over here, come on. And they're just going to all swim towards you. Like you got to find them. That's how you're going to be more effective. Yep. So that's a good tip. So make sure you have a power auger, not hand auger. You're going to get tired.
You need a good auger, especially up here. You need a good auger.
Down here, it doesn't get cold anymore. We literally just get like, pickaxe and just one hit. Just kidding. We used to get a lot of ice on Simcoe. Now it's sadly not as much as we used to.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So once you find these fish, let's just say you find that deep basin pod of crappie and they're right underneath you. What is some of the best lures that you find are the most effective for crappie, and then how you fish them?
I normally kind of fish them for the most part pretty aggressively. We used to use like a lot of like a small jig and a little crappie minnow or a half a minnow on there and drop it down. And the biggest thing is you don't want to drop into the school. You want to drop, like, especially if you're watching on your electronics, like your Vexler or your Humminbird, you want to drop in and stay just above them. You want them fish to engage and come up to it. And sometimes you only want to be a foot above them. Sometimes you can be for like 4 or 5 feet above them, and they'll just come up and they'll grab it. If you can get them to commit that far, most likely they're going to eat. But I use like a lot of spoons, I guess, like the Northland coffin spoon, the little small, like the new small tungsten ones would be really good. Clam make stuff like the Rattle and PT. These are really good too. And like I say, I fish aggressive. Swedish pimples. Some of my favorite colors are gold, a glow, blue and white. Chartreuse is a good one. But yeah, I think my new favorite color the last few years has just been gold, just something gold plated. Even like a little tungsten jig. There's not many big tungsten panfish jigs out there. It's like one that's pretty good size because we're fishing deep, and then just like a little tail off the back of it. I rarely use a minnow or anything anymore. It's always plastic.
I was going to ask if you're mainly using like crappie plastics or some live bait or natural bait, but yeah,
plastics.
Cool.
Yeah, and I like for the plastics anymore, I like either using just a white one or something that's dark, like a black or a motor oil. That's probably I think the motor oil has been my favorite one the last couple of years in a plastic.
Do you ever use a tandem rig as well? Like we were talking for perch, like a very common thing to do on Simcoe is we have like a Meigs jig or something like that, like a heavier jig. And then, you can kind of pound the bottom with it if you want to. And then above you have a fly, or you have a small little single drop shot hook above it with some small plastic. Is that something that you find is also effective?
It would definitely work. It would definitely work. Because I know like in the fall time, a lot of guys would, I don't know if you know what a pickerel rig is. It's kind of the same idea. It's got the 2 hooks on it, and guys use those all the time and catch multiple crappies on the same drop, And
that'd be cool.
Clean house, basically. Yeah, and then those will work awesome. And the cool part about it is sometimes if you get the right spread on it, you could be catching like in the same spots. There'll be perch on the bottom, and then you'll be up a little higher and you'll get the crappies, sort of thing. So yeah, it's a good. You're kind of killing 2 birds with 1 stone, I guess.
So when are we going to Lake of the Woods, Jesse?
It's been on my list, man.
That's a bucket list for me too.
It's far. See, we don't have to drive that far to catch a 50-inch muskie. We just go to Lake St. Clair, which is 4 hours away. I don't know if I'd want to fish Lake of the Woods or some of the other lakes, You zoom in on the map, there's like 20,000 of them. So
there is.
That wasn't.
It's endless. It's endless.
Yeah. So I think if I did go up there, I'd drop Andrew off at Lake of the Woods, then I'd go, meet Thatcher at one of his surprise secret lakes that I'll never come back to because it's like a 20-hour drive for me.
Right?
Well, Lake of the Woods is definitely up there for me, but I'd have to say Lac Seul would be that's the one I really, really want to get to at some point. But again, not, if you gave me a trip to Lake of the Woods, I'd take it,
Yeah. You're not going to say no.
Yeah.
So when it comes to crappie fishing, what kind of gear are you using? So if someone, just wanted to go out there, maybe have one combo that they can use to catch these fish, what are you kind of recommending for people?
A light rod. I wouldn't go any heavier than like, let's say 6-pound line. I use braid with that, like a 6-pound braid, and ice line is probably best.
Is it just because you're fishing such deep water?
Yeah, it's such deep water, and you want to be able to feel the bite or see the bite. Whereas if you're using monofilament on like these light little jigs, it's really hard to feel anything with them. And sometimes they bite so light, you're almost more or less watching the rod tip a lot of times just to see it move. So you want like one of the 13 fishing Widowmakers out there, kind of noodly rod ones that they have, stuff like that. So you can really see them bite it, I guess.
I have one of those 13 fishing tickle sticks, the one with the
there you go,
tip.
the tickle sticks. That's what I was thinking of.
And that thing, you have a little tungsten jig, and I have a little inline reel on it, so I lower my jig down, and I'll just watch the tip, and they'll perch grab it. And you see the tip just slightly twitch, like it sneezed on it, and you're just like, oh, there's one.
Yeah. And that's the thing about ice fishing in the wintertime with these fish is they don't bite aggressive. They're super nippy, and like they don't hit it hard.
Yeah. So when it comes to electronics, are you looking at a flasher? Or are you looking at a regular fish finder when you're fishing for crappies? I've
used a flasher my whole life for the crappies. I've just started using a live scope, which I haven't messed with too much for crappies yet. But I've only had it for, I think this will be my second winter with it. So I haven't had it for very long. Otherwise, I've been using a Vexilar FL12 or the Humminbird Ice 35 or Ice 45. My opinion, if you're looking for a flasher, the Humminbird Ice 45 is probably one of the best bangs for the dollar. It's got everything on it. It works awesome. It's got the zoom. It's like watching an HD flasher almost. And the price point is spot on for a flasher.
I've heard only good things about the Humminbird 45s.
Yeah, it's
a classic.
By far my favorite. It's a classic. It's tried and true. Same as like the Vexilar FL12 or the FL18. It's tried and true. It's been around forever. They work. And then I have a Helix 5. Yeah, it's a Helix 5, which I like. My eyes don't see. I can't see that good anymore, so it's really hard to look at the small screen on them. It works great, but you can get away with, a flasher or a fish finder, no problem to find them. And it just, sometimes you got to drill more holes to find the school of crappies compared to using a live scope or, the Mega Live or something like that.
Yeah. And I think
that does take a lot of the work out of it.
The flasher too, they're just because it's not an LCD screen. I find myself they're a little brighter usually. Say if you're hole hopping, you're outside, you're drilling holes all over the place, and you're just grabbing your flasher and dropping your transducer down there. It's easier to see it in the sunlight.
Yep.
So that could be a consideration too, because sometimes you have a fish finder with a screen and you have it on maximum brightness and you can't see it. You're looking down at it. You're trying to see it. So that's another advantage of a flasher for sure. And like we mentioned last week, that's something that a lot of people don't know how to use when they first get into ice fishing. So it's definitely something that it's worth the time to figure it out because it's not that complicated.
No, it's not. And the best part about a flasher is it's instant view. It's totally live view. Like if you move that jig a tiny little bit, you can see it move on the screen. It's instant. Whereas if you're using like a Humminbird Helix 7 or something like that, and just using the fish finder on that, there's a delay there. Whereas the flasher, it's instant. It's right up there with live scope, for what it's giving back to you in a reading.
All right. So as exciting as crappie fishing is, it's pretty exciting.
They're good, really good to eat.
Oh yeah, I love crappie.
They're amazing.
After the next segment, let's talk a little bit about eating fish very briefly, because Andrew loves eating fish. I like watching Andrew fillet fish, and then I like eating them myself. But, Anyway, so we have the next part of this podcast is very exciting because what we like to do is have on awesome guests, and oftentimes these awesome guests, like Thatcher, have awesome giveaways for you guys and girls. So if you hear that ruffling noise in the distance, that is Thatcher with all of his booty. And by booty, I mean not his bum, but it's a bunch of stuff you want to win.
Yeah, it's the tackle. It's called badonkadonk.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about the giveaway?
So I got a bunch of trout tubes. Got a few packs of trout tubes. There's a handful of colors. There's, your favorite Wonder Bread. A new little glow I put together the other day. So this one's not even on the website.
And by trout tubes, just by the looks of it, these look like lake trout tubes, not like stream fishing for trout tubes.
No, these are lake trout. We have got lots of walleyes on these things too, in the summertime, which is cool. And then, so yeah, there's a few packs of tubes, and then a lot of times we put together a trout kit for people when they want something. So there's some hunger strikes in here. There's a handful of just regular tube jigs for the packs of tubes, and then we also do, which have been super popular. And then there's now they're all tangled up.
Typical lures,
right? And then we do a tube jig with just a stinger off the back, just a treble hook off the back. It's really good for rigging like a chunk of sucker meat on, or a minnow or something like that with the tube jig. So yeah, there's a few of these in here also.
Awesome. That's literally like everything you'd need to get out fishing for lake trout.
I was about to say, that's going to be my order with you. I need to pick up one of those and a couple bags of tube jigs.
Just so you know, Andrew is not allowed to win this giveaway.
I know.
And I know all of his fake names that he'll use to enter. So that's not going to happen. But that's awesome. That's a sick giveaway.
And it's got a couple of our new great big 6 inches on it.
Oh, so I saw those on Instagram.
Yeah, we just dropped a new size, and to kind of see how it goes, because I think there's some people that like to use the great big tubes, and this is going to kind of work into the musky.
Yeah. Even tubes for pike. Finesse. Jesse was killing pike on tubes. Well, not like actually killing them, but like he was killing on tubes.
Wow. Yes, I was using some big tubes for pike, and it was amazingly, fantastically good. Like I was like, why haven't I been using tubes for pike this whole time?
Do you have pike lakes down there where like it's kind of clear water with deep weeds?
Yeah.
And you go pike fishing. Maybe they might not have a lot of big pike in it, but it's just like good numbers that you go and fish.
Yep.
Use the 3/8 ounce hunger strike that we make. It is lights out.
I bought this one for pike.
The red head,
white with a red head, and it's 3/8.
It's awesome. Like Whitefish Bay up here on Lake of the Woods. It's like we used to use a lot of like a 1/4 ounce jig head with a 6-inch minnow, or like a big chub minnow for fishing like the deeper pike up there, like trying to get down like 15 feet of water over the deeper weeds. And the hunger strike keeps up to it 1-to-1, if not better sometimes. So it's super cool. It's a lot of fun. Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Look fantastic. Yeah,
you got to replace the tube every once in a while. They hold up pretty well, so it is.
You're pike
it's
fishing.
Soft plastic. Yeah, and it's a thin piece of plastic, so it's not going to hold up forever.
Hey, using a sucker doesn't hold up well with pike either.
No, most of the time you're getting one fish per minnow.
Yeah,
yeah, and actually quite often they get casted off before people catch a fish on one. So yeah,
I hear you.
That's a good tip. So if you win this giveaway and you don't ice fish, you're one of those weirdos that doesn't like doing that, that's fine. You can either get this stuff and give it to one of your friends who does ice fish and be their best friend forever, or you can save the stuff and use it for other species, because let's be serious, tube jigs catch everything from panfish to musky and all the different
literally
sizes.
Everything.
Tubes are like one of the hottest things right now for musky. So yeah. Anyway, I thought right now we could get into some of the questions from listeners.
Ooh.
First of all,
some of these
you promised we're going to talk about eating fish. And I just have a question.
Oh yeah. Let's talk about eating fish.
What's your go-to recipe for cooking lake trout? And then what's your go-to for crappie? What do you like to do for each of those?
I'll keep it simple with the crappie. It's just batter it and fry it.
Is there a specific batter that you like?
I make my own.
Nice. So what do you put in it?
And the base is cornflake crumbs, and then kind of season it from there. I guess sometimes I'll mix some catch and cook in it even, and with cornflake crumbs. The cornflake crumbs just give it a real nice crunch.
Right.
Sometimes I'll give it an egg wash. Sometimes I won't. Depends on how I feel.
All right, keep your secrets.
And how much of a mess I want to make. Yeah.
I was trying some beer batter, a variety of beer batter stuff this past summer.
Oh, okay.
And the catch and cook. No affiliation, but like Jay Siemens and whoever helped him come up with catch and cook, especially like the spicy, even just a regular beer batter. Like, man, those are some of the most flavorful beer batters I've ever had. Like, legit.
It's not hype; they're legit.
Yeah. No, it's good stuff. Absolutely. And then for lake trout, I don't fry them very often. Very rarely fry. If I do, I cut them up into like little cubes and fry them up that way. I just find it's too strong. Lake trout's too strong tasting to be fried up in that way. So I like to either bake them or boil them. So up here, a big thing for our shore lunches is a trout boil, and it's similar to like a whitefish boil that they do. Like, it's a big thing down in like Wisconsin. They do whitefish boils, and it's cooking potatoes, carrots, celery in it, some onions. And then once all the vegetables are just about cooked, you throw in the fish, you boil it for, I think it's like 3-4 minutes until it's good and firm. And you pour all the water out, you throw a half pound of butter on top and a bunch of pepper, and
Cool.
you fill up. It's
I've
super good.
never had that.
And people just love it.
Cool.
Yeah, at shore lunch. That's one of our big hits for a lot of us guides here in the area, that when we do a lake trout, when we're fishing lake trout and we got to do a shore lunch, that's a lot of times what we're doing.
I'm gonna try that because I'm not a huge fan of trout fried. I find it just gets like watery. For some, I don't know why.
It does. It's kind of watery. That, or it'll get super dry if you overcook it.
So like, yeah, that sounds. I've never heard of that, let alone tried it. So I definitely got to try that now.
Yeah, it's so good. I don't know if I've ever cooked it for anybody that's complained about it, that didn't like it. They're like,
Awesome.
"Oh, we're super skeptical. Like, I don't know if I want to eat boiled fish." And it's
sounds terrible, but it probably tastes amazing.
It's first when you think,
especially when you put a bunch of butter on it.
Like when you first said boiled trout, I'm like, that sounds odd. But then I'm thinking, like, that's how you cook chowder. You put fish in chowder, and that's just boiled in milk. Like, I love chowder. So yeah, I gotta try that.
That's great stuff.
Try that, man.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Do it. And even if you didn't want to do the whole veggies and stuff like that, just do the trout by itself and dip it in butter. It's like a poor man's lobster sort of thing.
Oh, you gotta put potatoes in there.
Yeah, you do. It to us when we do it, like for a shore lunch, it's a full meal.
Man, sweet.
Yeah.
And it's like a one pot dish you could do like in an ice hut if you wanted.
Easily. Absolutely. It's super easy. Yeah. It's pretty hard. The biggest trick to it is once you put the fish in there, you don't want to stir it because the fish will turn into mush. You just kind of want it. You don't want to like stick the spoon in there and try to mix it all together. If anything, you just want to put the spoon in there and just kind of roll it more or less. You don't want to, otherwise it just falls into pieces and then you got a big mushy mess at the end of it.
And just because I'm super curious,
it's nice when you scoop it out at the end that you actually got some chunks of fish.
Yeah,
that you're gonna eat. So.
And just because I'm really curious about this, is that like fully filleted, or do you just kind of?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So completely boneless,
fully
nice.
Yep.
Excellent.
Yeah, fully boneless and then everything.
And you cube it before you. It's basically like you cook it just like a chowder, but it's just boiled then.
Yeah,
okay.
Just boiled. A good way to do it too, rather than using water, is do it with 7-Up. Some guys will even do it with 7-Up, and they'll boil it. It gives it like a really sweet taste. It's actually pretty good.
I love these weird things. That's fantastic. I have to try this now.
We're gonna try this, and we're gonna post about it and be like, Thatcher's insane. Just kidding.
It's not my thing. I learned it from my mentors, I guess.
He's like, I learned it from the hillbilly that lives in the ditch by the road.
He said, instead of boiling it in water, boil it in my moonshine.
Yeah, that would probably be good.
Right?
It's like, you don't have to worry about the bones. They just dissolve.
They do. Yeah. They're pickled.
It's 70% ethanol.
As much as this boiling fish cube thing is so exciting, I thought we could answer a few of these questions. Now, I would like to say, if you did send in a question, we're not going to get through all of them because a lot of the questions that you sent us, we already covered them. We're not going to cover them again. They're like, what rod should I use for lake trout? We already talked about that. Here's a good question that Bob asks. He says, what's the best piece of advice that you can give someone who is trying ice fishing for their first season?
Go with someone that has a fair bit of experience. Whether hiring somebody or just a good friend that does it a lot. They're going to show you how to stay warm out there. That's the big thing about ice fishing is once you're cold, you don't want to be out there anymore. It's very key. A good pair of boots goes a long ways.
I was going to say that actually it may sound silly, but one of the best questions you could possibly ask is, how should I dress? Like, honestly, ask an experienced person that and take what they say to heart, because if you haven't been on the lake and you haven't experienced a big cold, weather system move in or a storm or the wind on a completely frozen body of water, you don't know what to expect. So yeah, that is an awesome question to ask, and don't feel silly about asking it. Take it to heart what someone recommends.
Yep. It means a lot. Go with someone that does it a lot and see how they dress, see how they do it. Cause it like let's say up here, we go out, a lot of times by snowmobile, we can like trout fishing. We're going 40 miles before we stop at the first spot via snowmobile. Like we're 3-4 lakes away from the highway and it's not a place you want to get in trouble at. you want to be prepared and dress properly for it. Because if you end up having to walk or something like that, you got to be ready.
So anyway, I thought we could just talk slightly for literally 2 minutes about Thatcher's musky stuff. So if you're not familiar, the last few years have gotten very popular, which is great because they're good. They're good products, like we mentioned. And if you're in the musky community or you follow any musky fishing stuff, you probably know Glenn McDonald from 54 a Bust. I met him at Musky Odyssey. Super nice guy. He lives in Ontario, up there in the sticks.
Yeah, he's just north of us.
He pretty much like got everyone on these growlers.
He did.
So like this is the Drop Tine Tackle growler, and this is actually the Glenn McDonald color. Well, I took the blade off. It's a different blade, but it's the growler. And like I said, they giant, big, super sharp hooks. It's not a massive spinnerbait. It has some sound making grommet head on the top, and it's all like hand tied. It's going to last a long time. It's kind of a compact sized musky spinnerbait. This may look big if you're like a bass guy, but in the musky world, it's not that big of a spinnerbait, but it's the perfect size. And a lot of guys, even down here that fish in the Kawarthas or in some of the lakes that we fish, one of my fishing buddies, Will, this is like his favorite lure, and he loves it. And he's caught lots of fish on it. So,
and the head on that is loose too, right?
Yeah, it's kind of like a Vibrex,
you know,
like the Blue Fox, it like kind of spins around and makes vibrations.
One of the things I find using spinner baits for, especially musky, is you'll catch one musky on it, on like the lead formed heads, and then they're loose, and then you got to worry about it literally coming to pieces. That's how they're constructed. It's losing part of its structural, strength. But when it's designed to have a loose head, I don't care when the head's loose.
There's a lot less breakage with that.
Yeah.
And the good part about it is, if the wire does get all messed up, you can rebuild it.
Nice.
If you really want
modular.
it. Like if you had the skills to do it, you could easily rebuild it.
Nice.
And reuse the parts. You don't always have to get it. We'd love you to buy a brand new one, but it's if you wanted to send it back to us, we can rebuild it. Whatever, it's one of those things.
I don't know, Andrew, if you've seen one of these up close. I kind of hide my good musky lures from Andrew, but it's kind of like built like a bucktail because the actual skirt is tied onto a tube which goes onto the shaft. So this can spin around too and like be removed and put on another thing. There's an egg sinker underneath here for weight. And then the hook, another thing that I like about these, because I'm a huge spinnerbait guy. We fish a lot of the Kawartha Lakes, which have a lot of weeds. So we don't fish bucktails a lot. We should probably, but we chuck a lot of spinnerbaits. But if you ever have to cut a hook where the hook gets dull, smash into a rock, this hook is easily replaceable. There's just some shrink tubing, just like a bucktail. You can take it off, put a new piece of shrink tubing on, put a new hook on, and there you go. Your spinnerbait's as good as new. All the other spinnerbaits you buy that have the hook that's molded right into the head, if you have to cut that hook or something like that, that spinnerbait's garbage now. Like it's literally garbage at that point. So this spinnerbait, and they're not expensive. They're very reasonably priced, and it's something that you can catch a lot of fish on. This for me is going to be one of my lures that's tied on almost all summer when we fish in the Kawarthas, because it's a perfect size. It's not too big, not too small. And if you're someone that wants to have an attachment, you also make the growler attachment, which I'm a big fan of, because like we fish a lot of like swim baits and stuff. These it's basically
and that was another thing
arm.
that Glenn did. That was his other big thing that he wanted to do.
Glenn got me on this. So this is a Bondi Royal Orba, and you put the growler spinnerbait arm attachment on it, and it gives it that much more thump and profile. And that was something that I did chuck a lot at that back lake that we went fishing for muskie. And remember that? So it's you can put a swim bait on that. One of the things when we were fishing Lake St. Clair is very popular down there is to have an arm on a big swim bait like that. And it just gives it that extra thump, vibration to attract those big fish, especially in murky water, stuff like that. These fish, they can feel vibrations, and sometimes lures that they see all the time, they get used to that feeling, they're like, oh, I know what that is, right? But all of a sudden you add some extra vibration, they're like, that's new, what's that? And then you catch them.
Let's go back to talking about what I really want to talk about, the the triple deuce. Like how heavy is that thing? Like that's gonna be a lot of lift on those blades, which I mean I like stuff with a lot of lift on it.
So the triple deuce is where we started at. The whole history behind this, I guess, this particular bait, and it's changed throughout the years, is I think it was like back in 2010, I think. I made my first one out of a bunch of bass spinnerbaits. I was like cutting blades off and putting them on another spinnerbait. I'm like, oh, I'm going to try this and I'm going to try that. Later that summer, I ended up catching a 51-inch muskie on one. I'm like, sweet, maybe this is something. So I made a real version of it, I guess, not piecing little ones together and whatnot. And kind of sold them a little bit for a year or two. And then I guess back in 2017 it was, I started making them again and kind of took it from there. But we've changed it going into this season. It's it's back to the original size, the 1.5 ounce, which is what we used to make them as. We offer them with either a single hook on it or a treble hook now, and they'll come with a grub on it. But yeah, it doesn't have as much lift as you think it would, and it doesn't pull as hard as you think it would. It's like each set of blades kind of almost cancels out the pull of the next one behind it. So it doesn't pull any harder than, let's say, like a 888 or a 999. You'd think it would pull like a 12, like it's just an arm breaker. So
it looks like
doesn't,
an arm breaker. It
doesn't do that anymore. And the newer version is set up to cast a lot better too. Like you'll get better casting with it into the wind. For years with it had a lot of issues with tumbling in the air, and it would follow up and wrap around the leader and stuff like that, especially casting into the wind. It's not going to do it as often anymore.
Well, put me down for one of those. Yeah, I want one.
Sounds good. We can do that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. My wife makes them all. So she's tying all the skirts and she's putting all the baits together.
Awesome.
On the musky side of things.
I have to say, she's very good.
Yeah. She's doing an amazing job.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I know if you were wrapping it would just be like trash. Just kidding.
I've had to fill in a few times, and the student has definitely surpassed the teacher. So I'll say that much.
Nice.
Yeah.
So I highly recommend everyone, if you've never heard of Drop Tine Tackle before, it's a local Ontario family company that makes very high-end premium fishing lures and I'd say your pricing is very reasonable. I'd say
especially your musky stuff too.
Add 25% on for Andrew. Just upcharge him a bit because you deserve it. But it's high quality stuff.
Whatever Jesse says.
Upcharge the idiot tax for me. That's what I need.
Yeah, the idiot tax. But all kinds of stuff, really good bucktails, lake trout stuff, all kinds of different stuff. And some very unique stuff, like we mentioned, but also like your base jumper bucktail. That's very unique. I'm not going to get into that. Like we'll have to have you on again for a musky podcast, but lots of really unique stuff that just looks fantastic. And coming this year, I know Andrew is going to put in an order, and I got a bunch of stuff ready. So it's stuff that we personally really like to use. I know we're not like pros, we're just average guys, but we really like it. We highly recommend it. So definitely check it out. So that was a really good podcast, but Andrew right now is going to tell you, we'd like to thank you again, Thatcher, for that awesome giveaway, but Andrew's going to tell people how they can win that giveaway.
So a big thank you to everyone who already is, and you know the answer to this. But if you don't know, check out our Patreon. Jesse has the links down below as well. Anyone who is a Patreon member of $2 or more a month is automatically entered into the giveaway. So you don't have to think about it. If you're already a Patreon member, thank you. Awesome. You are in. If you aren't yet, I mean, it's like buying one of us a cup of coffee. And if you don't like me, it's like buying Jesse 1 cup of coffee. If you prefer me, it's like buying me a cup of coffee. So a couple bucks and you have a chance to win. So that's the benefit with that. As well, we love to get reviews. If you have a chance, be sure to drop a review, leave a 5-star rating. Obviously, I'm going to say leave a 5-star rating because why would you put any less? Let's be honest. But we love to hear feedback. That helps us to be able to climb, in the rankings, which is great. And it's not just for us, for our benefit. When that happens, more people can find the show. That allows us to be able to have more pull to get awesome guys like Thatcher on the show who give away better giveaways every single year that we're doing the show. We're getting better and better giveaways. And all that is because of you listeners and the ones who have rated our show and all that stuff. So a big thank you. And if you haven't done so, please, go ahead, write that review, leave this rating.
That's a lot of stuff to remember, but Andrew remembers it every single time. So again, there are some costs to running the show, obviously. So we do appreciate everyone doing that. And if you think about it, it's like $1 for an episode. So it's not that much, but every episode that we have a giveaway, it's like a raffle. Like it's a pretty good chance that you'll win something. And the giveaways in the last year, I'd say have been pretty dang good. So we like to thank Thatcher again. Nothing's better than winning free fishing tackle. You don't even explain to your wife when it gets here, I didn't buy this, I swear. She's like, I've heard that before. Someone gave it to me. Who? Those guys on the internet.
And then when we post the video, you can save it and show her and be like, look, here's the proof.
Yes. So anyway, we'd like to thank you for this podcast again. We really learned a lot, and we appreciate all your knowledge. And we hope that you have a really good rest of the season, catch a lot of fish, make us feel jealous, send us some pics. If you haven't been following Thatcher on Drop Tine Tackle on social media, make sure you do that. I'll put all the links below so you can follow along, see all his new products coming out, a lot of good fishing pics too. And make sure you follow us on Instagram, of course, too. So before we end this episode, we have, as tradition states, we warned you about this, the quote of the week. And to handle that, we have Thatcher.
I was just thinking about this, and I might just keep it simple. Take a kid fishing.
Make sure you nose them, though.
That's... yes, that too.